Stead, we're live.
Wow. Okay. We had some technical difficulties getting connected there. Thank you, folks, for staying with us today. Boomer Zoomers. They're our beloved Boomer Zoomers from the Charlestown Senior Center. They're going to talk about potential state tax-free Social Security income here in Rhode Island. Welcome to the Dugout. I'm your host, Mike Stenhouse. Now, this baseball and this cap have added significance today. Do you know if I give you these nicknames, do you know, audience, what Kid, Hawk, Cy, Rock, and Scoop mean? Anybody know what that is? Come on now. Think baseball. Think north of the border. Think Montreal Expos. Think my former teammates. So the 1982 photo of the All-Star game in Montreal. Those are the 5 Expos All-Stars that year, all of whom I play with, all of whom I was thrilled to call my teammates, all of whom are my friends. And of course, we wish a great rest in peace to number 8 there right in front, Gary Carter, who died of brain cancer many years ago, tragically. But Andre Dawson right there. So Gary Carter, Kid. The Kid was his nickname. He was just like a happy kid running around a sandlot all the time. The Hawk. Andre Dawson, next one. Not sure why they called him the Hawk. Must be the way he patrolled center field or something. Then you have the pitcher, Steve Rogers, who we nicknamed Cy because everybody thought he was a Cy Young caliber pitcher. Behind him, Hall of Famer Tim Raines. Rock Raines was his nickname because that's how he was built, like a rock. And then one of the best hitters I ever saw, never gets the credit. That's number 0, Al Scoop Oliver, first baseman. He really was a pretty poor defensive first baseman, but they called him Scoop anyway. So anyway, somebody sent me that picture today, and it just brought back such great memories of my playing days that I had to show you and share a few memories with you. I had to wear my Expos cap. Now, my Expos cap, as you see, kind of all beat up. So I'm going to take it off for now. I'm going to go back to the old trusty Harvard cap. All right. So today we got a little bit of commentary. We got 3 great guests today. I'm going to comment a little bit more on some of the woke silliness that's going on out there. Some of it as it pertains to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. We've got a expert guest coming up. You might have seen the article about life sciences, biosciences coming to Rhode Island. Well, this guy is an expert in all that in Massachusetts. So we're going to see if Rhode Island has what it takes to develop a life sciences industry here in Rhode Island. And then we've got another guest from a national organization. I've talked about it before. Coal-powered cars, coal-powered electrification. Is it real? Or is it fantasy? Our expert will talk to us about that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll end our broadcast today with Boomer Zoomers, our favorite senior citizens from the Charlestown Senior Center. And they'll be talking about pensions and Social Security income and inflation and all that other stuff. All right, tomorrow we have a special event, and we've been talking about this for a few days now. The Ocean State Current, as part of our election waves coverage. You thought the elections were over. Well, the next elections are already here, and my former friend, my former high school classmate, well, went to the same high school, not the same class, Steve Laffey, the former mayor of Cranston, who is an announced presidential candidate. Our Ocean State Current will be hosting a town hall style meeting, a question and answer session with him, our audience, and the media tomorrow at 12:30 at the Chapel Grill. You can watch it right here on oceanstatecurrent.com/live. We're going to live stream the event tomorrow. So it's really kind of a lot of firsts. We haven't done much live streaming in the past from remote locations. And of course, it's our first president. I mean, how often do you have a presidential candidate stumping in the state of Rhode Island? Right? I mean, never happens. Well, happens to be a friend, happen to be someone who's been on this show many times, and we're going to cover it, and we're going all out for it. I hope you'll tune in tomorrow at 12:30 right here on this live channel. All right, a little bit before we get to our first guest, just a little bit more on some of this woke silliness out there. Indiana University, this is a reputable school. They're med school students. We don't refer to them as women anymore. We're just going to refer to them as people with services. Servi, is services right, or is it servi? I don't know. It doesn't matter. And some other professor over there says, we're really going down a bad path here. If we want to do this kind of foolishness. But look, this is the foolishness we're getting out there. People with services. Just, I don't know. All right. Now, this was downplayed. We even downplayed it a little, but apparently it was a little more important than maybe we first thought. It certainly wasn't the major factor while Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. But they, as we told you yesterday, the reports are that all but one member of their board of directors were just, political woke donors. They had no, they didn't have, there was a compliance officer or some, they didn't have key positions filled. I mean, the bank was under poor management from the board to the paid staff. And it's because they decided that climate and woke and diversity and equity and inclusion was more important than making good investment decisions on behalf of their depositors, on behalf of their stakeholders. They ignored the obvious risks that were going on out there as interest rates started to rise after they'd invested in low interest rate bonds. They just ignored it all and just hoped that things will work out. Well, that doesn't work. Diversity, equity, inclusion does not work when it comes to investing pension funds, when it comes to investing depositor funds. If you're a bank manager, it just doesn't work. The woke philosophy won't work. That was our theme a few days ago. Won't work. And while it wasn't the main reason that bank failed, it had a lot to do with market conditions. But the point being, if you had savvy board members, savvy staff, you could have navigated the tumultuous market conditions that were created by all this spending and lockdowns and inflation and everything else that's been caused by, or exacerbated, because it was initially caused by Trump, but exacerbated by the Biden administration. But when you have diversity, equity, inclusion people first, instead of talented people first, this is the disaster that can happen. And you got to wonder, you know what I call them? I call them political supremacists. These people just think they know best because they care more, because they're diversity, equity, and inclusive. That means they're smarter and better and know best for everybody else. Have they gone too far again? Joe Biden, it's in court now, but Joe Biden wants everyday people to bail out, rich kids from their student loans. Now they want everyday Americans to bail out these rich, woke investors for their funds. And remember, all the blame, as we said yesterday, all the blame doesn't just go on the bank. The depositors should have seen it coming. They have some responsibility in this too. If you know that your bank has gone fully woke and all they're talking about is how they're supporting climate change and DEI, you might want to get your crap out of there, right? You might want to do that. So there's a little responsibility on the depositor side too. Now, you got to wonder, have they gone too far? Will it cost them politically, the left? Only if there's any presidential candidate who's going to capitalize on it and call them out on it. I mean, I can talk all I want. It's not going to make a hoot of difference. I got to assume somebody will. I got to assume some candidate is going to use this and call it out for what it is and pin this whole thing on the left as it should be. All right, last thing before we get to our guest. With all of this stuff, with all of the inflation, with the recession we had, the recession fears coming, the big spending, the high inflation, these concerns over bank bailouts, what's that going to lead to? Is it going to lead to a run on the banks? I thought, I love my funnies. So I don't know if this was a Babylon Bee. I think it might have been a Babylon Bee, but take 50% off your net worth. What do you care? Just like you were shopping at Banana Republic, taking 50% off is a good thing. So anyway, all right. You might have seen this. Let's switch gears. And as a prelude to our first guest, let me share this article. You might have seen this in the Providence Journal about 3 weeks ago. Leaders call for developing a biotech industry in Rhode Island. Here's what they propose. Well, we just happen to have a biotech expert who's joining us today. So let's welcome, I think for the first time, right, Bill? You and I have talked many times, but I don't think we've had you on the show before. Let's welcome Bill Smith to In the Dugout. Bill, how you doing? You're muted. If you would unmute yourself, please, Bill.
Yeah, I would have remembered being on the show given your background. And
okay. Now look, you are really playing the dugout game today. You got your New York Islanders stuff on.
Yeah, I even have my name on the jersey because I grew up on Long Island. I want to reassure your listeners, I don't cheer against the Bruins. I know their AHL farm team is in Providence. My 3 kids grew up in Boston. They love the Bruins, but I grew up on Long Island. And so my high school was across the street from the Nassau Coliseum, and they were winning Stanley Cup after Stanley Cup in those days.
That was the Gretzky days, right?
That was, yeah, it was the 78 through 81.
All right, now I'm going to put this cap back on because believe it or not, when I was a kid, I was a Montreal Canadiens fan.
I believe it.
I love the name Jacques Lafleur, Guy Lapointe, Yvan Cormier, Henri Richard. I loved all those names. Now, so I just put my Expos hat back on for a second for that. But there was a famous goalie for the Islanders named Bill Smith. Was that you?
There was a famous goalie named Billy Smith. They called him Billy. And I had the honor of meeting him at the
so it wasn't you.
The new Islanders rink the other day. Yeah. He was Billy Smith night, so I went and I got to see him. It was very exciting.
All right.
Nice guy. He's throwing his stick around a lot, but he was really, really soft-spoken and nice.
Okay. All right, Bill, let's get to business here. So we talk, Speaker Shikarchi and others in this state are talking about throwing some money at a life sciences, biosciences, effort here. If they can do it in Worcester and they can do it in Boston, why can't they do it in Rhode Island? You are a senior fellow and director of life sciences at our sister think tank, a much bigger think tank in
Boston.
All right, Bill, I'm gonna put you on hold because I'm seeing that we might still be having technical problems, but let's keep talking until Larry the Liberty guy cuts in. But at the Pioneer Institute in Massachusetts, I'm seeing on one send that this one signal over here, the live stream is ended, but my producer always tells me don't stop the broadcast until I cut in and tell you so. So he hasn't cut in until there's a little bit of a delay. He hasn't cut in and told me so yet. So let's just keep going. I just want to give you that warning. All right. Does Rhode Island have what it takes? We've got an article you wrote right there on the Ocean State Current. Let's show that to everybody. Go ahead, Bill. Take it away.
Yeah. So first of all, I believe that the life sciences industry is one of the great American industries. We're ahead of China, way ahead of China. Europe used to be very prominent in the life sciences. They've faded because they have socialized healthcare systems. And the U.S. produces more new drugs every year than any other country. So it's a great industry. It's high paying. It's technology jobs. So I'm sympathetic to the Rhode Island speakers. But
when we talk life sciences, Bill, what are we talking about?
Well, generally, there's no exact definition, but it generally means biotech, pharmaceuticals, and even medical devices would be included in those. And anything that kind of promotes human life would be fall into that category. And the temptation, I think, with some politicians, particularly in blue states, is to spend a lot of money, and then life sciences companies will appear. And I'm not sympathetic to that. I think at least in the Cambridge, Boston area, the life sciences cluster was created by the universities, MIT, Harvard, Tufts, to some degree. There are great universities and medical schools in Boston, and the scientists. You want a life science industry, you got to have life scientists, people they're expert in biology and chemistry, and you find those people in universities. So I think Rhode Island has something to be said for it in this. They have Brown University, which has an excellent medical school. And I think I mentioned in the article that the dean of Harvard's engineering school, Frank Doyle, my wife works at Harvard and worked with Frank and knows him and likes him a lot and said he's really smart. He's the new provost at Brown, and he has a background in the life sciences. I mean, the first thing I would do if I were in Rhode Island is I'd go see Frank and say, what do you need to spin companies out of Brown University and Brown Medical School? What do you need?
All right, so let's just take it one step. So you're saying in your view, the first requirement is a strong university-based life sciences. We need academics, right? And experts, right?
Exactly.
All right, so that's the first step.
Talented
and
science.
Does Rhode Island have enough of that? Does Brown University have enough of that, or do we need more?
Well, Worcester did it largely with WPI, which is not a gigantic university, but they were the college in Worcester that helped build their life sciences sector. So I think Brown has the firepower and the endowment and the talent to do this. But there's going to have to be a focus on getting those academics that are doing great research to commercialize it, to get outside the university and start a company, hopefully in the Providence area or Newport or anywhere.
All right, so that's the cornerstone piece, right? Is the university stuff. What can the government do? I mean, they're talking about throwing money around. Where would they throw that money right now? They didn't say where they're going to spend it, but everybody loves to throw money around and pretend like it's going to accomplish something.
Yeah, and I don't think you can do it in the life sciences unless you have the talent first. And what I would recommend is that you have a very modest government effort. So, for example, the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina became a technology hub because the state government created a small office, not a big bureaucracy, just a small office that helped companies that wanted to relocate to North Carolina. And you could do that in the Economic Development Agency within Rhode Island. An expert who knows about where the lab space is, what environmental rules affect these companies, and help them kind of as a kind of ombudsman to help the company land somewhere successfully. Cut through paperwork, give them ideas on lab space. There are things that state government can do, but government spending is not going to create a life sciences cluster.
And so in Massachusetts, you kind of hinted at this earlier, the politicians want to take credit, but the politicians might have done some things after the fact, but the politicians didn't create the industry in Massachusetts, right?
No, they did not. So, you have a Harvard biologist that's doing cutting edge research, and a venture capital firm hears about him, goes to him and says, I want to finance a company. And then off he goes. He leaves the university, becomes the CEO of a new biotech company. It's privately financed. He's got a great idea. He raises money. It does an IPO. Everybody gets wealthy, and you suddenly have a big biotech company. And there were companies that did that in the Massachusetts area. Again, it was mostly private money. The venture and the VC funds and private equity funds more than eclipse what the government could provide, and they do it more smartly. A VC firm that wants to invest in biotech, chances are they're going to have a Harvard-trained doctor on their board who's going to say, yeah, this technology works, we should invest in it, or no, I don't think that technology does work. So that the private sector can do this very smartly in a way that the government can't. And I know there are a lot of states out there that want to give seed grants to startup companies. I'm just skeptical about that. I just think the government can't be as smart about markets as private money can.
Yeah, one of the lines I liked, and I know you did it just for me, right, Bill? I would not make a field of dreams mistake just by thinking that you throw money at something to build a building or something that people will come. They need to be there already. You've already established that, but to have a life sciences industry, you need university-based academics, but you do need companies to invest in actual labs and things, right?
Yep, you do. And but if these scientists are first rate, they're going to attract capital. They just are, and
a growing demand for this. It's not like we're saturated in the industry or anything.
No, there's so many breakthroughs happening in the life sciences. It's extremely exciting. After we mapped the human genome years ago, that's starting to finally pay off, and we're starting to see all sorts of therapies that get to really the heart of the disease. And it's exciting for cancer and oncology research. It's exciting for a lot of rare diseases. Like I think they're going to cure hemophilia, for example, in the near term.
Wow.
Within the next 5 years. Sickle cell disease. A lot of terrible diseases that have been around for a long time have cures that are in the pipeline. So it's a very exciting industry.
One of the interesting points you make is, we've talked about Rhode Island's horrible business climate. We just can't attract businesses, A, because of that climate, B, because of the terrible schools that are here. Executives don't want to move here if there's bad schools. And C, what was C? I forget what C was, whatever. But we have a bad business climate. But in life sciences, that business climate isn't as important for some other low margin company to think about coming here because it's a high margin industry, right?
Yeah, the profit margins in a biotech company might be 20%. So yeah, they're concerned about the business climate, but not as much as the guy trying to run a manufacturing business, that's
right,
trying to make payroll every couple of weeks, and little changes made by the government are going to really impact them. Biotech companies, pharma companies have enough capital; they don't worry about that as much.
I love the point. I'm calling it the Henry Ford point you made here. I think you know what I'm referring to, but I'll just tell your last word of the state should actually consider buying the products produced by the companies they seed. Henry, in the state, Henry Ford said, look, we're getting this assembly line, these Ford Model Ts or whatever they were done, but I'm going to require that every employee buy one. That helped create a little demand, helped create a little revenue and talk around the company. Same kind of thing you're talking about here.
Yeah. So if you have politicians that are railing against biotech companies and their products, and look, the industry has a very unique business model, right? They have a patent on a drug for 20 years, but they may only get to sell that drug 7 or 8 years because they put patents on early in the R&D process. But then for those 7 years, they can charge a high price for that drug. Then the drug goes off patent and it goes generic, and then it's really cheap, pennies on the dollar sometimes. And that's the business model. That's just what it is. But politicians don't like that. When it's patent protected, they don't like those higher prices. And a lot of them in state Medicaid programs won't even buy cutting edge drugs. They just refuse to buy them. And if you want to locate companies, life sciences companies here, you gotta say, okay, we appreciate what you're doing.
All right, so you kind of mentioned this earlier, but what I don't understand, what is the vitriol that politicians as you write at the end here, often level at life sciences? What is that? Where does that come from?
Well, it used to be, the market has changed a little bit. It used to be that drug prices were very high and many new drugs were coming on. And in the 1950s, most people
basically the big pharma thing. That's the big pharma thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then the politicians would rail against the price, and they'd hope the voters, particularly senior citizens who vote in high numbers, would be sympathetic to their attacks on the pharma companies. I think the market has changed a lot, and what's happened now is that insurance companies are charging more out of pocket. It's not that drug prices are growing so fast. It's that people are paying a lot of money out of pocket. And so politicians can still get away with criticizing drug companies. But in my view, currently, the problem people are having, it has to do with the insurance design, the benefit design of their health plans, where they have a $5,000 deductible and suddenly they get cancer and they got to pay $5,000 out of pocket. That's problematic to me.
I think it's a noble goal that Speaker Shekarchi and other leaders have here to try to bring that here, especially if we have a cornerstone in Brown University and potentially a growing life sciences academic staff there. You do mention, I don't want to get into it. I'm just going to mention it and then go on to the point. You do mention that there was big government spending in the United Kingdom on this, but it failed because for decades they had driven out this kind of talent. Like you said, there was some vitriol, this big pharma kind of thing. And now those European life sciences have set up shop here in Massachusetts. So we don't want Rhode Island to make the same mistake. We don't want to throw good money after bad. So wrap things up. What is your advice to Speaker Joe Shekarchi? What, if anything, should our government be doing to encourage life sciences industry?
I would go, first thing I would do is I would go see the new provost at Brown University, who knows how to do academic industry partnerships and spin out companies. He did it at the engineering school at Harvard, and he could do it at Rhode Island, and he has a life sciences background. So the timing of this is almost perfect as far as the speaker is concerned. And I'd go see him first and say, what do you need? How can we help you spin companies out and locate them in Rhode Island? I would also talk to venture companies, and I'd bring the venture firms and private equity firms in, and I'd say, do you know about research going on at Brown University or other Rhode Island colleges? We want you to encourage those academics to start companies here in this area. So go after the private money first before you start spending public money.
Is that what you do up at the Pioneer? Do you try to you work with lawmakers and match them with private industry and colleges?
No, I'm not really an economic development guy. I concentrate more on policies that impact the life sciences cluster. So, there's regulation on marketing.
You work with lawmakers all the time, right?
I do, and I get a lot of interest from all around the country. Texas and Florida have been trying to create life sciences clusters for years, and they just haven't had as much success. They're having some success in Texas. They have a couple good medical schools there, and cancer research is pretty prominent in Texas now. But they haven't been able to duplicate what's going on in Boston and Cambridge because they just don't have the universities.
Is San Francisco a hub of this as well?
It is, because it's Stanford. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the two clusters of life sciences companies are in blue states that don't have very good business environments.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Massachusetts and California. So
all right. If I can arrange it, would you come down here and meet with Speaker Shekarchi?
I'd be happy to, of course. I love Rhode Island.
Bill Smith, you're an Islanders guy. I love it. The New York Islanders, Long Island guy. Thanks for joining us and having some fun and great expertise here on In the Dugout. Hey, maybe we'll have some news and we can have you help us out here in Rhode Island. Thank you, Bill.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for
Bill Smith. Thank you. All right, so our next guest is, we just talked about business climate. One of the reasons we have a bad business climate in Rhode Island is high energy costs, second highest energy costs in the country. Earlier today, I spoke with an energy expert about a column he wrote that's posted on the Ocean State Current. Larry, let's see that interview. So turning back to one of the issues we cover regularly here on In the Dugout is energy, climate change, the cost of energy, the left's overreaching policy. So we welcome back to In the Dugout, Joe Trotter from the American Legislative Exchange Council. Joe, you are the director of ALEC's Energy, Environment, and Agricultural Task Force. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Excuse me. All right. So we have a post up that you, based on a report and an email you sent around recently. I love the title, The Coal-Powered Electrification Agenda, Separating Fantasy from Reality. I've talked often about coal-powered cars. These electric vehicles really originally are powered by cars. What's your article about?
So it takes a look at Vermont, but also sort of a wider trend, which is trying to electrify absolutely everything. And by that, I mean heat pumps, the things that heat your water, keep you warm during the winter, cars. They're looking for absolutely everything to be run off the electric grid.
No more gas stoves.
No more gas stoves, even though they're cheaper in the long run. And personally, I prefer cooking on them. But it takes a look at sort of two things. One, a PJM report. PJM covers, I believe it's 13 states in terms of the electric grid. And it takes a look at Vermont and the electric grid up in the Northeast in the New England area. Now, Vermont is a very interesting state. They have a very high renewable portfolio standard, which basically just means they have to use renewable resources to power their grid. And they have the highest RPS in the country, where they're aiming for 50% of the grid to be run off of these renewables. And they took their one nuclear reactor offline, and they have a whole lot of solar, a whole lot of hydro, but they import most of their electricity from out of state, and actually from out of the country. A lot of it comes from Canada. But the thing that really got me is where the rest of that energy comes from, and it's mainly wood. They take scrap wood and
All right, so before you go there, so they shut down their nuclear reactor, right?
Mhm.
And would you say that the renewable energy made up that difference that was shut down?
Oh, absolutely not. They wound up having to get most of it from out of state.
So that's why they're importing so much, and that's why they're burning so much wood, because they took away a major source and they didn't have anything in state, at least that was green, to to replace it with. I mean, and this is a common advocacy of the left. They shut down reliable and cheap energy sources and abundant, and then replace it with more expensive, less reliable, and less abundant sources. Right? That's the same mistake we're seeing everywhere, isn't it?
Yep. And it's more than just that, though. With this push towards electrification, they're pushing people to rely more on the grid. Now, here at ALEC and me personally, we believe in an all of the above approach when it comes to energy. So in the case of electrification, if something happens with the grid, everything goes down. Heat goes down, power goes down, your cars will go down because they can't be charged. It's a real problem. It's putting all of your eggs in one basket. And beyond that, it's also this push to generally put the source of the electricity into one or two baskets that aren't necessarily as reliable as technology that's been around for 100 years for generating electricity.
So Rhode Islanders should care. We have the second highest energy costs and some of the highest electricity costs in the nation. You talk about Vermont, we're heading that way here in Rhode Island as well. Now you've got, now ALEC is known for its model legislation, and you actually have legislation that I want to show everybody that you suggest lawmakers consider. It's called the Electric Generation Facility Closures and Reliability Act. What does that do?
So basically what it does is it says, don't shut down power sources, generation sources, before their replacements are online. It's not saying, hey, you have to go in one direction or the other. It simply says, don't take the generators offline until whatever is replacing it is online. And it should seem like common sense there. But if anything, the demand for electricity is growing, especially with this push towards electrification. But what is happening is nuclear plants, coal plants, even natural gas plants are being taken offline before the replacements, which are supposedly solar and wind. And I mean, more on that in a bit, but before those farms are on the grid. So you've got.
Well, I get it. It's the same thing with my wife. I'm going to make a joke here, but it's true. My wife loves to throw away my old toothbrushes, but don't throw it away till you get me a new one. Yeah. Well, what do I do in the meantime, right? So let's not throw away nuclear, coal, and all that till we get something new to replace it. Same idea, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with increased efficiency. There's nothing wrong with new technology, but it's got to be implemented before we take the old sources offline, especially when we're artificially, through these top-down government measures, creating an increased demand. It's messing with the market on the supply and the demand side.
Well, and here's a perfect example of that in California. We all know the story. So California is trying to force everybody to buy electric vehicles. In Rhode Island, by law, we have to follow California emission standards and rules. So we too have to phase out internal combustion engine automobiles for sale by within the next 10 years. But they don't have enough power on the grid to do the cars. So right after they force you to buy them, now they're saying, oh, yeah, but you can't charge them. This is what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. And we're having the same problem in Virginia. Virginia has the exact same standards. And California itself is forgetting for a moment how unreliable their grid is and how high their energy prices are. they simply don't have the charging stations to go around. They're pushing not just in the more short term, they're pushing for companies like Uber and Lyft and these rideshare programs to they're basically trying to force them to make their fleets all electric, which is kind of a problem because just on those numbers alone, again, forgetting reliability, which is just awful out there, they can't even charge all these cars if, pretending for a moment, they had the generation sources.
Are we heading back to this?
I mean, that, bikes, running, it's not great.
Let me ask you to digress. I mean, I'll encourage people, go to Ocean State Current, read the article that Joe wrote there. It's a great piece. I might come back to the article at the end, but I want to get to a few other things. There's been a leaked memo recently from the Biden administration, as much as they publicly denied it about a month ago, but they really are seriously looking at banning gas stoves.
All right, so they really want to take away your gas stove. And this push came somewhat out of nowhere, but if you take a look at who's pushing this, there are a few billionaires who are pushing this particular agenda, and it's being done under several different guises. You've got the climate change people who are saying, "Oh, gas is bad." You've got the
saying it's unhealthy, right?
Yeah, they're also saying it's unhealthy, saying, oh, it's causing lung issues with children, which is a little ironic because you've got this whole push for complete renewables on ethanol in terms of cars. Well, if you run a car on ethanol during the summer, it's going to create ozones and other contaminants that are also going to cause problems for children. So there's this just concerted push out there, and it doesn't really make sense beyond the, oh no, it's burning fossil fuels. And it's interesting because there are experiments out there and technologies such as hydrogen that could potentially one day replace natural gas, but that the technology to create it on a large scale just isn't there currently. Yep. And the one that is, ironically, is creating it from coal power.
I want to ask you about this. We had a senator on. I don't know if you've seen. You guys basically write model legislation. I don't know if this legislation came from you or from other state, but here's an article. We had the senator who put up this bill. It was a bipartisan bill, by the way. We call it the Rhode Island's Real Green Deal. I call it what's good for the goose is good for the gander bill. And basically what it said is, if you're going to hold fossil fuels to these emission standards, if you want to talk about mining and the use of it, and then the emissions that result of it, we need to do the same thing with green energy. What is the cost, the environmental impact, the ethical impact, whether it's child labor or whatever other abuses in the Congo or Nigeria or wherever? What is the total cost of energy from mining, production, usage, emissions and disposal? And she basically said, before you do any green new project, you've got to answer all those questions. What's the total cost of that energy to the environment or to human rights in that regard? That bill is in. It's gotten some bipartisan sponsorship in the Rhode Island Senate. Have you seen or heard of that bill anywhere else in the country?
So I've heard of it. It did not come through us. And when we do model policy, it comes from our state legislators. Alec as a staff doesn't do it. My job's more to coordinate everything and then talk about the issues once our members have decided to. That would be a very interesting model policy to go through our model policy process. And
yeah, I encourage you to take a look at it. It's a brilliant bill. It's basically just holding the left to the same standards they want to impose on everybody else.
And the unfortunate truth is green energy isn't all that green. It like you mentioned, everything that goes into it, whether it's solar panels, the magnets that power the windmills, all of that comes for the most part from overseas, from the Congo, from China, from
And really
Afghanistan.
abusive labor conditions too, right?
Abusive labor conditions, generally awful regimes in terms of human rights, the actual emissions that go into mining all of this, it creates environmental catastrophes. About a decade ago, there was this incident in China where a solar manufacturer had some leak. Every single plant within a few miles in every direction of the plant turned white, just died straight up. It poisoned the ground. And the unfortunate reality is no technology, no generation source is totally free of an environmental impact. And I'm going to take more of a look at this legislation, but
Send it to you. But having said what you just said, the environmental impact, is it fair? I postulated in my comments and to the senator. Now I'll ask you, based on everything I've read, and you know a hell of a lot more than this than I do. This is your expertise. It's a legitimate question to ask. Is green energy really any less environmentally damaging when you look at the totality of the cost of it, like we just talked about, from the whole beginning to end, cradle to grave, than fossil fuel energy? Do you have an opinion on that, or do you just think that is a legitimate question we need to start asking?
it is a legitimate question, and the answer can be found in some of the marketing terminology there. When you look at, for solar panels, for example, they advertise, like a 10 or 15-year payback period. And what that actually means is it takes 10 years of 100% efficient use to make up for all the pollution that went into making that panel. So wow. Yeah, and they don't always operate 100% efficiency, especially in areas northeast where the weather could be not great. That means it's operating peak efficiency with perfect weather conditions. Doesn't really happen. It degrades over time. And so what's actually happening is they're saying that every solar panel, let's say they claim to have a 10-year payback period, what they're actually saying is they put 10 years worth of pollution that one house would
I got it
generate into the atmosphere, into the ground, everything like that, before it is a cleaner energy source.
We got as a country, as a world, we got to look more at this. You've been putting out, sorry, our time is short. He is Joe Trotter with the Trotter. His piece is on the Ocean State Current, separating fantasies from reality, this coal-powered electrification. Remember that, folks. Coal-powered does not necessarily mean coal, but it really means fossil fuel-powered. But much of our electrification is still going to come from fossil fuels, even if they want to pretend that using electricity is carbon emission-free. Joe Trotter, thanks for your very insightful analysis. Thanks for writing that piece. I'll get you that legislation, and we'll look forward to having you back on in the dugout shortly.
It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Joe Trotter, American Legislative Exchange Council. You know, high energy costs, restrictions on energy choices affect us all, but it doesn't affect anybody more than our beloved seniors and our retirees. So this is a perfect segue. We're not going to talk about energy so much today, but we are going to talk about finances with our beloved Boomer Zoomers. So we're back to the Charlestown Senior Center with our Boomer Zoomers. Bill, who do we have with us today? Bill Isabella.
To my immediate left is Dean Kosaka, and to the left of him is Jeff Coombs. Equally handsome, aren't they?
Yeah, but they're especially handsome because you all took my advice from 2 weeks ago, and like me, you've all joined me in donning a cap. So thank you for being.
But I must admit, I look particularly dangerous with a hat. I must admit, I'm not in a radio face.
You were talking about Bill, not me, right? With that, Jeff?
No, we can include you in this too, Mike. These are my friends, you know.
All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about, in general, seniors' finances. Right now, many states do not tax Social Security income. Are each of you collecting Social Security checks, I would assume?
I am.
Yes.
All right. So Senator Elaine Morgan has introduced legislation this year. You can see the official press release here from the General Assembly that would eliminate the Social Security income tax in Rhode Island. Basically, would take whatever income you received in Social Security and deduct that from your other income in the state. Bill, let's start from you. How important would that be for seniors?
I think it's very important. I know a number of seniors, my sister included, and many other family members who rely heavily on their Social Security benefit. Now, many of them get all the money back anyway because their earnings is way below the level. But those who are not, are right on the fringe. I think it's critically important. That should not be taxed. We've already paid taxes on that once. I don't think it's fair and equitable to have us pay additional taxes on that.
Dean, your quick thoughts?
Well, I feel like depending on how many seniors we have in this state, and I get the idea that the number of returns could be on the order of 1/4 of the returns or they're close to thereabouts. So it would have a fairly substantial effect on the total tax revenue. So that being the case, it may not be fair to just say blanket that all seniors should get a deduction like that. But I agree that those seniors that have a high dependence on Social Security should get benefits in that direction.
Yeah, Jeff, let's build on that a little bit. To Dean's point, there are probably over 200,000 seniors in this state, probably most of whom collect Social Security. And you're right, it could be that could be a significant revenue loss, but yet we're facing unprecedented budget surpluses because of all the federal money that's come down the line. We know there's surpluses and they don't even know what to do with it. So, returning that. So comment on that, Jeff, but also comment on, do you know seniors who have left this state in lieu of lower tax states who might not do it? I mean, isn't this a way to keep you guys and gals in our state? Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, yes, precisely, because in my little neighborhood alone, I live in a condo development, and 142 homes are there, and there are specifically people I know that left and went to Florida. Whether they went for the taxes alone, the tax relief alone, I can't say for sure, but a significant number of people have just left the state and they moved to Florida. At least in my neighborhood. So I see it as a way to avoid the taxes.
Bill, Social Security was designed to be a safety net for retirees and seniors after their working years, increasing the strength of that safety net by eliminating state taxes on it would certainly be a positive. I want to ask a question this way. Given the high inflationary pressures that especially impact seniors who live on fixed incomes, and it might be annually adjusted, with inflation or something, but still it's a fixed income. This, especially in these times, this would be a way to counter those high inflationary effects, don't you think?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm sure it would be. When you're running inflation somewhere between 17 and 20%, that's the real number. And that affects every day, everything you buy every single day, groceries included, energy and so forth. So yeah, I think this is something. And besides that, I think you brought up a very important point, and that was the amount of states that do not tax all or some. We're one of 12. Let's stop being at the bottom of the list of everything. Let's, for a change, turn things around where we can say Rhode Island does not tax your Social Security income. I don't think it's going to have a major effect on how the state operates. I think the state has a pile of money that Governor McKee has been holding on to for what reason, I don't know. But sooner or later, he's going to have to spend it. But nevertheless, I would like to see the seniors treated a little bit differently. Now, I am not in favor of everyone. If you're in the $1 million range or some extraordinary number, let's say 400,000. That's a number that's been bandied around by President Biden. If your income is at 400,000, yeah, you can go ahead and tax it. But there again, too, now you get into a constitutional issue. Why is it that because I've been successful, I have to pay even more taxes than the next guy? So I say eliminate all Social Security taxes. Yes, that's my argument.
All right. Dean Kosaka, in her media release, Senator Morgan makes an interesting claim, and I wanted to see if, as seniors, you guys feel the same way. She says that by exempting your Social Security income from income taxes, well, let me start first. I think she's saying by taxing, it's a disincentive to work more because, well, gee, if I work more, I make money, my Social Security might go up, but there's a big hunk of that going to be taken away in taxes. If you remove that tax disincentive, she's claiming that more seniors or retirees might actually go back to work because there'll be less of a disincentive on taxes. How do you feel about that, Dean?
She may have a point, but in my case, it's usually a personal decision that you make. It's not, you're not thinking about how this is going to affect the overall tax structure and your entire family. Yeah, of course, you think about that to an extent, but when it comes to your own having to go every day to work, and if you're slaving over there and you feel like this is too much, I can't handle this anymore, you're going to retire anyway. I mean, it's not like, and you don't want to go back to that, obviously. So
yeah, you're saying it's as much of a lifestyle thing as it is a financial thing, right?
Exactly.
Jeff, you're that question came up about Constitution. You're the constitutional expert here. You teach classes to the group on it. So if it was means tested or income tested, only certain people below certain levels, to you, would that cause constitutional problems?
Well, that's traditionally the way that we've written our tax codes. I think it is a constitutional problem because you're singling out one specific group of people that happen to make a certain amount of income, and you're taxing them more. So where's the equity in that? Since we've been hearing that word a lot lately with the woke people.
Yeah.
But to get back to the taxing of the Social Security, I just heard today that the governor's got so much money, he's going to give 100 of his top executives in his administration big pay raises, and they've already supposedly from the news comment they've already received a pay raise in the last budget go around. So what do we have, a $13 billion budget in the state? Why do we need a budget that high when states with a million people population?
Agreed. All the more reason we should be taking care of our seniors. All right, let's do this before we get to the next related topic. Show of hands. So all or nothing, all, no matter your income, all Social Security income tax exempt in Rhode Island. Raise your hand if you're in favor of it.
Yep.
All right, you're all right. Despite some good arguments, you guys ended up all there. All right, now on the other side of things, and we don't know if well, let's talk about private pensions now, not so much Social Security. Are any of you also collecting private pensions? Hey, Martha. Good to see Martha. So 2 of you are collecting private pensions as well?
No, I'm sorry. I'm collecting public pensions.
Likewise.
Public employee. All right. Well, the Biden administration last year wants to encourage pension fund managers to invest pension funds into woke, ESG, environmental and social governance projects that are more likely than not provide less of a return on investment than do traditional investments. So that's a way that so while on the one hand, we might be providing tax-free Social Security, on the other hand, other people might see their income or their pension returns go down because of this crazy investment strategy. Bill, your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you, boy, that's picking winners and losers. And that's exactly what the government should not be doing, picking winners and losers. I think of Solyndra, that's the obvious one. Solyndra, some of these wind farms, Tesla, all these electric cars that we're building and selling, by the way, every one of them is being financed by you and I. Every single one of them. Now, Rhode Island just came up with a new program saying if the cars cost under $60,000, they'll give you, in addition to what the federal government gives you, they'll give you $2,500. This has got to stop. I manage my own finances I have a broker, of course, but I mean, I manage my own. I don't have a private pension. I'm living on my 401. What was in my 401. that all said, I think it's awfully important, it's terribly important that the financial people that we engage and the institutions that we represent and pay into, they should be looking at the highest and best use of my money, not the most woke subject that they can find. I just think it's wrong, wrong, wrong. And to quote Jeff, wokeness has got to end. And this is not a way to, this is a way to perpetuate it only.
Well, Dean, comment on that, but let me add in this little element too. We know that the Silicon Valley Bank that just collapsed, that's been the national, while it wasn't the main cause, but certainly it didn't help their bottom line that they made poor investments into these green deals rather than traditional deals. Also that their board of directors was all these green ESG, DEI people who didn't know any better, that they were mismanaging their funds. These pensions are vitally important to our seniors, are they not?
Well, I agree with you 100%, Mike. I feel like politics should be kept out of these types of things, pensions and individual choices. Where's the freedom? That's what I'm asking. You know, what happened to our freedoms? If you earn money, you should have the right to decide what you're going to do with that money, how it's working for you or not working for you. So
ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, etc., they're not going to be chosen by anybody. If you're a gun manufacturer and you have a booming business, Smith & Wesson right here out of Springfield, Mass., nobody's going to invest in you. If you invest in any of those companies that the current administration is not willing to work with, they're going to go out of business because nobody's going to invest in their funds. It's as simple as that. It's just another way to bring this Green New Deal to our laps, and I'm against it.
All right. So speaking of green, let's probably the final main topic here to Jeff. Jeff, my prior guest wrote a column, talked about the electrification agenda and how it's coal powered. All this push towards electric energy as if it's clean when most people don't understand that a lot of that electric energy comes from coal and natural gas and petroleum and other things like that. Now, we talked about income, Social Security, private pensions. We talked about ESG. Well, energy is a big cost to everybody right now, all families, all businesses, all seniors, whether it's gasoline, home heating, or the electric to run your home. Rhode Island has the second highest energy costs in the nation. So all of this kind of ties together, right? How seniors are being crushed by all these left-wing woke policies.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I see. You know, it's with these. It should be a free market principle that operates, picks the whether we're going to use what type of energy we're going to use. And I'm sure the free market will determine what's the most cost effective if they would just be left alone by the federal government and all these heavy-handed regulations that we have on the energy producers in the country. They'll pick the right one, the most cost effective. I mean, look at with natural gas, how effective that was. Even though we got over the fracking issue, that it was supposedly damaging the environment, and we found out it wasn't. And natural gas was prolific, and everybody was heating with natural gas. And now we're turning our teeth on natural gas. And boy, you better not have a home heated with natural gas anymore. And what are we supposed to do in New England? Go back to heating with electricity because that's supposed to be the cleanest type of energy. And
as we just discussed with our guest, there's not enough of it to go around.
Right.
In Vermont, they've resorted to burning wood because there's not enough electricity on the grid, and it's getting so damn costly with all these regulations on it as well. Bill, wrap it all up for us.
Well, regarding the picking winners and losers, if we really want to pick the winners, let's build some nuclear power plants. Instead, we continue to close them down. Millstone and others along the East Coast here have been closed. I think, quite frankly, our government is not doing us justice by picking the winners and losers. I think we need to let our legislators know where we feel on this thing. And you're helping us do that, Mike, with this segment. Thank you.
Well, thanks. And I want to give Dean one more really quick one. We got about 30 seconds. My prior guest, they put forth legislation suggested before you shut down a nuclear plant or a coal plant, you've got to have something commensurate to replace that energy with. You can't just have net energy losses on the grid. A good common sense legislation, don't you think, Dean?
I agree with that. We don't want to end up like California. And let's face it, most of the energy we get is through fossil fuels. So you're going to have to gradually wean yourself off of it. You can't just do a sudden turnaround. That just doesn't work.
Even President Biden had to admit that recently publicly earlier this week. So, all right, our time is up, folks. Bill, Isabella, Dean Kosaka, Jeff Koons, thanks again for making our great Zoomer segments so much fun. Thank you to our audience for tuning in today. And from In the Dugout, Mike Steno signing out. See you next game.